with a $5 meal deal with new McValue. You pick a McDouble or a McChicken, then get a small fry, a small drink, and a 4-piece McNuggets. That's a lot of McDonald's for not a lot of money.
Prices and participation may vary. McDouble meal $6 in some markets for a limited time only.
I'm Alice.
And I'm Brett.
And this is the Prosecutor's Legal Briefs. Welcome back to the Prosecutor's Legal Briefs. I'm your host, Alice, and I'm joined, as always, by my reedy co-host, Brett. It's better than Karen-y. My Karen of a co-host, Brett. Actually, I take it back. I'd rather do that. And welcome to my co-host, my Karen of a co-host, Brett.
Nice. Excellent work, Alice. Always.
I do what I can. I do what I can.
On top of things. Whew. Yeah.
Well, y'all, we said we were done. No. Let's put blame where it lies. Brett was like, I'm done. I'm never going back to Karen. I hate doing this case. We're never going back to it. And then he texts me when I'm deathly ill, like on my deathbed. And he's like, so what you doing tomorrow morning? I'm like, what? He's like, I'm not going to tell you what it's about, but like, what are you doing tomorrow morning? I'm like, that's super vague. And I'm not going to say I don't know. Like, what do you want to do? He's like, we should like live stream Karen Retrial. And I'm like, oh my gosh, you are a glutton for punishment. But we did. And instead of having to sit through hours upon hours upon hours of Karen Reed trial part 2, we're just going to recap it for you in a succinct, probably 85 minutes.
Exactly. You know, the benefit of this case is if you do it by the week, they have so many half days that the trial is actually a little bit shorter than you think it's going to be.
That's true.
I hope at some point they get into a rhythm where they do entire days of testimony. So they can do this long.
We can't hope for that much, but
it was an interesting week. Even with the half days.
Even with the half days, indeed. So what we have to say, obviously, those of you who've never heard of Karen Reed, consider yourselves lucky.
Yeah.
We covered.
Stop listening.
Go live. Go touch grass.
Yes.
Go smell some flowers.
Exactly.
Enjoy the life that you continue to live. And you're also probably one of the people that should have been picked for the jury because, you know, that was what we did for quite a while. So, Brett, against all odds, we are back covering Karen Reed because the Commonwealth is back to retry Karen Reed, of course, for the death of
John O'Keefe.
Yes, I was about to start coughing. Sorry.
Alice is sick still, if you didn't know.
Sick of this trial.
She's recovering. There you go. So, yeah, you guys know this. There was a trial a year ago. It ended in a hung jury. Now there's going to be a retrial. And what's interesting about this, Commonwealth has brought in special prosecutor Hank Brennan, who was a defense attorney and basically has taken over the trial. Lally, however you pronounce his name. He has taken one witness, but generally it is Hank Brennan's show. It's kind of interesting because last time Yannetti and Jackson seemed to trade off a lot more, but Yannetti has only done a little bit. Lally's only done a little bit. It's really been the Jackson Brennan show. And if you remember when we covered this the first time, we talked about how if there was going to be a retrial, there were a lot of things that needed to happen. The focus of the Commonwealth needed to change. The way they presented the evidence needed to change. We are not geniuses. It was just obvious, I think, to anyone who looked at it. And if you're watching this new trial, the difference is striking between the approach, the focus, the way the evidence is presented, and really the Commonwealth is doing exactly what we suggested they should do.
Right. And we're not suggesting that they took our advice. It really was hindsight 2020, right? The main problem that we kind of pointed out last time was we knew that the defense was going to present this huge conspiracy theory involving dozens, and the list continues to grow, truly continues to grow, of who all framed Karen to cover up the death or murder of John O'Keefe. But we had said the Commonwealth has the burden of proof to tell the story, their story, and to be too reactionary and to begin to play defense at the very beginning does you no favors because the jury becomes very confused. You get the opportunity when you go first, and that's what the prosecution does. You get the opportunity to set the stage, and you need to set the stage. If you start off in a defensive posture, first of all, the table's not set because when you're defending something, you don't have an affirmative story out there first to defend, and the jury becomes confused. So if you present the evidence too late, for the most part, and we'll talk about some evidentiary things that are new or different this time. For the most part, it's the same set of evidence, but the way you present it truly matters, especially when you have a trial that goes on for weeks on end, which this one, we're already on week 1 and we are nowhere near the end of it. So this time they're getting to the brass tacks right away and being affirmative in what the story is. So there's no confusion starting with the opening statements by Brennan as to the Commonwealth's theory of how Karen hit John O'Keefe with her car and left him for dead.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And you really can only appreciate this if you watched the first trial. If you're listening to this, you probably did. But there was just this feeling for a very long time that the Commonwealth was always on its back foot. The defense was always, they were on the attack the entire time. It was as if they were the ones presenting the case. And every witness, it seemed like, ended up being turned to the defense's side to perpetuate this theory of a conspiracy and a cover-up in this case. And part of that was just the almost unthinking way the prosecution presented its case. I mean, they sort of just, every firefighter who was there, every police officer, they just sort of went in order. And even people who didn't seem to add anything at all, they're putting all those people on them. And in this presentation, in some ways, it can actually seem a little bit more disjointed because in some ways the Commonwealth is kind of jumping around a little bit. But it's been interesting to watch how it all sort of comes together. Part of that, and we're going to talk about this in a second, Karen Reed has talked a lot over the last couple of years. She's given a lot of interviews. She's done a lot of specials and documentaries. One thing the Commonwealth is doing this time that they did not do last time is they're using her own words against her. Some of those words they didn't have last time. And so they'll do things like they'll put on a witness and that witness is making a key point. The defense will dispute it. And then when the witness goes down, they play a 10-second clip of Karen basically confirming whatever it was that was in dispute. It's
it really is like the most, this was done in the opening. Did they do it? Yeah, they did it in the opening.
Yeah, they did it.
Well. Like literally the prosecution's like, did you hear Karen Reed say that she hit him? Yeah, she said, I hit him. And then the defense is like, you never heard that. Last time you said it 2 times, not 3 times. You're lying now. There's no way. She's never, members of the jury, no one has ever heard or reported or stated that Karen Reed said, I hit him. The prosecution doesn't fight back, says, Your Honor, Exhibit 3, and plays a video of Karen Reed's face on an interview that she gave willingly to be broadcast all over the world. Did I hit him? I hit him, right? I hit him. I mean, it is just incredibly effective storytelling. And this is what we mean by preparation. You can't always know what's going to happen in a trial because it's like live theater, except, I don't know, the witnesses are not rehearsed in the way that your theater characters are. And you can prep as much as you can and still not know what exactly is going to come out of a witness's mouth. But when you have exhibits that you know how they're going to fit in, they can come in for sure because statement by a party opponent, it's going to underscore whatever you are asking your witness to say. That is just beautiful because it's succinct, it is punctuated, and you know exactly what the jury will see at the end of that witness.
So let's give you an example of that. So in the opening statement, Brennan sort of lays out what he's going to present. As Alice said, the defense said some things in their opening that were sort of inexplicable. Number one, they did say no one ever reported that she said, I hit him. It was always some version like, did I hit him or whatever. And I think the defense is really splitting hairs there. Like no one wrote it down in a report. The problem is you can't really split hairs in an opening because the jury hears what you say and sort of takes it, right? So if you're having to explain that later on, well, he didn't really mean it that way. He meant no one wrote it down in a report. Yeah, they said she said that, but the paramedic didn't write in a report. Not that he would do that. But anyways, so, Alan Jackson, he's doing that in his opening. And I'll just say, I thought Yanetti's opening last time was much better and they should have let Yanetti do it. Jackson is more naturally a closer with this sort of argumentative style. And I didn't think it was great, but either way. So the Commonwealth, they do their whole opening and they basically conclude we're going to show that she hit him and she left him there in the snow. And then they play this clip. We're going to play a few clips. Some of them, the audio is better than others. Sorry. Some of these, the Commonwealth pulled directly from, things that had been published. Some of them are sort of background stuff. Some of them, the recordings just aren't great, but do your best. I think this one's actually pretty good. This is the first clip that the Commonwealth played after the opening statement.
I didn't think I hit him, but could I have clipped him? Could I have tagged him in the knee and incapacitated him? He didn't look mortally wounded as far as I could see, but could I have done something that knocked him out and in drunkenness and in the cold didn't come to again?
And this would have been the moment you dropped him off at the party, you're thinking?
Yeah, would have had to have been.
Oh my gosh. I mean, I've seen that clip and hearing it again, if you guys can't see me, but I was covering my face because it was so bad for Karen Reed. It's semantic.
It's bad. It's bad in so many ways, right? Because number one, you can present that as like a confession. Well, I hit him, but I didn't think he was mortally wounded. Well, he died.
Which
so it
means
didn't matter
that
what you thought.
she thought he was wounded. Mortally wounded and wounded, right? Why would you say mortally wounded? Why not just say, I didn't even touch him? Like, what are you talking about?
The very best spin you can put on that is she meant when she saw him in the snow, he didn't look mortally wounded, though that doesn't really make any sense because he was in pretty bad shape at that point. And the other problem with that is the interviewer clarifies, and this would have been when you dropped him off at the party. And she says, yes. The best spin you can put on that is that is when she would have hit him if she hit him. And that's what she was speculating about. The problem, and this is why when you lie, it's really hard. When you tell the truth, you have to keep your story straight, that old idiom, right? Initially, her story was she dropped him off and she left. She was angry. She left because she was unhappy with him, right? That was her initial story. Never saw him go inside. This was important, you may recall, for the search warrant. Didn't see him go inside. There's no evidence he ever went inside. How can we get a search warrant, right? Well, her story has changed. Now her story, the new story, is she watched him walk inside. And the newest of the new stories is not only did she watch him walk inside, she waited because she thought he was coming back outside, and he never did. Well, if the new lie is true, why would she think she hit him? It makes no sense. What she's saying here comports with her initial lie. It does not comport with the new story. If she watched him walk in and he never walked out, it makes no sense for her to now say, well, I thought maybe I could have clipped him. I could have hit him. Makes no sense at all.
Yeah, absolutely. And so obviously the defendant, she is a defendant, can talk all they want. Why you choose to talk, take this as a lesson. If you're charged with anything, don't give public interviews.
Shut up.
Don't talk. First of all, don't talk in a private setting. Certainly don't talk in a public setting because this will be dissected. And absolutely, if you have a trial, you should expect it to be played. I would play it because everything can be read in multiple ways, obviously, not to mention that her lies are being exposed by her own words.
So after the opening, and it was interesting because we wondered, how will they do it? Well, it looks like they're basically following the opening. So they started with this firefighter gets to work. He doesn't know any of these people and nothing to do with these people. The alarm goes off and he knows, got to go work on this. He gets there. He sees this scene and he hears Karen Reed say, I hit him. Well, that's going to be firefighter Timothy Nuttall. He's going to testify first. And of the many things he says, the thing that's most important is that at some point he goes up to Karen Reed and she says, I hit him, I hit him, I hit him. He says she said it 3 times. That was sort of the main thrust of his discussion. Unlike some of the other people, he basically has no connection to anybody in this case. So why he would lie is a little unclear. So then we have Alan Jackson on cross. He's trying to undermine this. And he spends, I kid you not, at least 2 hours arguing with this guy that previously he testified that she said she hit him 2 times. And now he's saying 3 times. And presumably, by pointing out this inconsistency, the point he's trying to make is, well, if he got the number of times wrong, or if he's lying about the number of times, then maybe he's lying about her saying it at all. And he spends all this time doing that. And then he leaves the stand, and I'll play for you the clip that the Commonwealth plays right after Alan Jackson spends all this time trying to convince you he's lying about hearing her say that. Here's what they play.
So the closest I must have said was, did I hit him? I know I said I hit him, but did I really say it as many times as law enforcement's claiming I said it?
I know I said I hit him.
Said, I
Did
know
I really
I said I
say
hit
it
him.
as many times? Maybe
It's
I said it
literally about
twice,
the
but
number
not
of
3
times.
times.
And here is where you have to know which inconsistencies help you, right? That inconsistency doesn't help you. You know why? Because first of all, Firefighter Nuttall was a really good witness in the sense that he spoke very professionally. He seemed very unattached in the sense he didn't know anyone in this case. He didn't get emotional when he was attacked or when he was being directed. It didn't seem like he was completely in the pocket of the Commonwealth. He just seemed like a professional who had trained to be a firefighter, who had all these protocols. He explained the details of what it meant to be a firefighter paramedic very well to the common person. And it became clear that he was good at his job. So he was this professional, and then he testified a good long bit, right? He's an important witness. And so he'd been testifying for a couple hours or maybe longer. And the I hit him really was a few minutes in the direct. And I was thinking as the director was going, man, spend a little more time on that, develop it a little more. This is the big flourish. And then when the prosecution didn't, I was like, oh, okay. But then bam, Jackson gets up and does the job for the prosecution. Now I know why the prosecution didn't highlight it, because they had an ace in their pocket, which was the video. So they didn't want to they wanted to play their hand right. And now I understand after the entire kind of direct cross. And then when they played the video of Karen Reed saying, I know I said I hit him. Did I say it that many times though? Now I understand why they didn't highlight it as much as they did. But you know who did highlight it? The defense. And so for 2 hours, we heard
so many times.
Nuttall say, yeah, she said, I hit him. Jury, did you hear that? I hit him. I mean, it was literally facepalm. I wanted to say to Jackson, stop it. Do you not see what you're doing? He kept playing video.
He kept playing video and saying, where did it happen? And he would be like, well, it's before you start the video after it happened. And he's like, so it didn't happen in this video, did it? He's like, no, it happened before. And he's like, well, you said it was when this was happening. He's like, so one person's doing CPR and then we trade off. That's everything. He just explained it.
He was just a professional.
So well. And the thing is, and look, Alan Jackson, I'm not saying he's a good defense attorney, but there were little things about Nuttall's testimony, things he didn't remember. It's been a long time. He has this thing about him wearing a jacket and he wasn't wearing a jacket. Like there's some things he doesn't remember. So if you had just focused on that and never mentioned again the whole she hit him thing, maybe later on you can say, look, the only person who heard her say she hit him, he didn't even remember what John was wearing that day. His memory has been corrupted.
The jacket is actually such a better example of the inconsistency, because think about it. He literally was like, it's the big puffer coat, right? Like having to cut through a big puffer coat is very different than not having a jacket at all. Whereas did she say I hit him once, twice, or 3 times? No. That's not the inconsistency you want to highlight. You want to say, really? You don't remember cutting through a Marshmallow Man coat? Or you did remember that, but you didn't clearly. How could you remember something that is so obviously not there? Then how could you possibly remember words that were spoken by a woman in hysterics when you can't even remember things that you touched with your hands, like a big jacket or the lack of a big jacket? So what's the truth, Nuttall? What's the truth? I don't think we can trust anything you say. That's what you do in a direct.
So they have to deal with that issue. Nuttall gets finished testifying. And then they bring Carrie Roberts on. And we had said one of the issues with the prosecution's presentation last time is they stuck Carrie Roberts just in the middle of the trial. And it was a very short presentation. What she said was really powerful, but it was very short. And it enabled the defense to do something, which was they didn't have to cross her. They just didn't cross her. They took the gamble of, we can't really touch this woman. We're just going to hope the jury forgets about it, basically. And she was so in the middle that I think that's probably what happened. This time, Carrie becomes much more central to the case. She's testifying second. And Brennan spends a lot more time with her, developing everything she said, and really makes her something that the jury is going to have to tackle. They're either going to have to believe her or not believe her. There's no forgetting about her, basically. And she recounts this bizarre phone call that she gets from Karen saying that John was dead. She then later on, Carrie gets a phone call from Karen saying, I think he was hit by a snowplow. I think he's dead. And one of the setups for this is Carrie, prior to all this happening, has really no connection to the O'Keefes, the Alberts, Jim McCabe, all these people, right? She's since become friends with them. They've been sort of bonded by this trauma and everything they've gone through. But at the time, she really didn't. So she's difficult for the defense because you can't paint her as a conspirator, really, though they're going to try. So the other thing she testifies to that's important is that Karen's taillight was already broken. And remember, the theory of the defense is that essentially the corrupt state police, Michael Proctor, broke the taillight, took all the pieces. Even if they didn't break it, it was slightly damaged. It wasn't really broken. They took all the taillight pieces and they, sprinkled them in the yard, and they planted them in the yard to frame Karen. Well, Carrie's saying it was already broken before this, and this is explaining sort of how broken it was. And this is early on in the morning. We're talking like before 6 o'clock in the morning. So this is tough for the defense. This time they can't just ignore her. They have to cross-examine her.
And boy, do they have to. I mean,
I'll give it to Jackson. He dials back his demeanor. Like ordinarily, he's so aggressive. He tried to dial that back a little bit for Carrie.
Yeah, he does. And here's the thing. Not only is she number 2 in the trial lineup, so everyone's still fresh. You're going to remember who she is. She's the first person to testify who is there. She's not some professional coming to the scene. She knows Karen. She knows John. She hears these words from Karen, and she is recounting everything that happened in first person, not from like a paramedic perspective, right? And so Jackson, he has to cross-examine her. And so there's a lot he has to deal with, but he chooses to focus on Carrie's grand jury testimony. Remember, grand jury testimony is secret, but when you go to trial, you have to turn over all the testimony. And oftentimes, if you testified before, grand jury happens closer in time to probably the event than trial. And there's an inconsistency because at grand jury, Carrie did say that she heard Karen ask Jen McCabe to Google about hypothermia. That's actually very good for the prosecution, right? Because that would indicate that Karen had some sort of knowledge that he'd been out there long enough to catch hypothermia. But at trial, now Carrie says that she doesn't remember hearing this conversation. And Jackson wants the jury to believe that Carrie's testimony now that she didn't hear about the question Karen asked indicates she perjured herself. So it's not that she misremembered or that, her story has been changed. She's now in the pocket of X, Y, and Z. He is just saying she's committed perjury. But this is not great and kind of strange for Jackson to do, because if she's perjuring herself, which is a crime, to help her good friend's killer, you'd think she'd stick to that perjury at trial and just say it again, because that story at grand jury is much better for the prosecution than later on. So again, this is kind of the ticky-tacky, trying to find anywhere you can split hairs and say, aha, you see, perjury. So
it's weird.
It's not a great thing to point out.
I'll say this. I'm sure it's happened before, but I've never actually seen the defense try and argue that the person is testifying truthfully at trial, but lied in grand jury. Usually it's the other. Usually it's, well, in grand, and you'll see that throughout this trial. Well, in grand jury, you didn't say you heard her say she hit him, for instance. You might see something like that. And the person will say, well, they didn't ask the question, or I didn't think about it, or whatever. But what I'm telling you now is true, right? And you can see the power for that because, they were telling the truth in grand jury. And now that we're at trial, they're lying to try and make it worse. Here, there's a couple problems with this. Number one, this is all about this Google search that the defense and their incompetent expert thought happened at 2 o'clock in the morning. They came up with this story like years later, after the grand jury testimony, that's when this happened. So you'd have to believe a few things. Number one, you'd have to believe that Carrie, who is John O'Keefe's very good friend, lifelong friend, is lying in grand jury to protect Jen McCabe, someone she didn't really know before this happened, about something she doesn't know is important and hasn't even become part of the conspiracy yet. And yet, despite her willingness to perjure herself in grand jury, where you don't really need perjury because there's plenty of evidence going to get the indictment. Yeah, there's not cross-examined. She's willing to do this in grand jury. But then now, when it's so important, she's adamant. No, I didn't hear that. I'm sorry. I got it wrong. I messed up in grand jury. Why would she do that? It doesn't make any sense. What makes much more sense is that the way the question was phrased was she knew of that conversation happened because Jen had told her later. And when Lally asked the question, that's what she's referring to, not that she was physically present when it was said. And I'll just tell you, yeah, and this is when you're evaluating stuff, you have to think about this kind of thing, right? Like, does this even make sense? What makes more sense? That she is intentionally perjuring herself in grand jury, but now telling the truth? Or does it make more sense that she knew about that conversation by the time of grand jury? She was a little bit confused by the question. She answered it the way she did. But then when she got a better question in trial, rather than lie in a way that she knows now, by trial, she knows, oh, this is actually really important because they're going to say that search happened at 2. If I just say I heard it, no one can dispute that. No one can undermine it. That's the time to lie if you're going to lie. So the whole thing, the whole attack makes no sense.
Might we add, second time around, she testified in trial 1 and she saw the result. Anything she can say to bolster, she's still the prosecution's witness. She's not a hostile witness, right? She already knows what's going to happen last time. So this is not even one of those like, oh, you invoke the rule and the witnesses don't know what's going on. They saw everything play out last time and there was a mistrial, right? So she absolutely knows what would be better testimony, yet she still says the truth, you'd think, because it actually is not helpful for the prosecution story.
It would have been funny if at some point she was like, you know what, Mr. Jackson, now that you ask, I think I do. I do remember. Thank you so much for jogging my memory.
I didn't remember it the first 20 times you asked me, but now I remember.
Thank you. It was so weird. And the thing is, like, he keeps bringing it up and the jury has no idea what he's talking about, right? Presumably. I mean, they will later, but it's another one of those instances where he should have, the way I would have used it is the only person who can testify to that search to Karen asking that is Jim McCabe. Even Carrie Roberts, who was right there and wants justice for John, says she didn't hear it. That would have been a much better, I think, attack. Like, I feel like this is the kind of attack.
Part of your conspiracy.
Exactly.
Right? And this was the problem we said last time, was that Jen McCabe, Carrie Roberts, and Karen Reed were all together in those early hours of the morning. Remember, they were the ones that Karen Reed called and they were driving around looking for John together. And the problem is, while on the defense's theory, Jen McCabe is completely 100% in the middle of like this conspiracy, Carrie Roberts, she wasn't. Like, she was John's friend. They couldn't fit her within the conspiracy. And that's why it was very troublesome.
So after this, one of the things that Carrie talked about was the taillight being broken. So once again, once this testimony is finished, we have a clip of Karen Reed. So I think this one is the most difficult one to hear, but we'll see.
Taillight missing that I had picked out at John's at 5:45 before we drove over to Fairview. I'm showing Jim and Terry, look what I just did to my light, and I'm worried that there's going to be some kind of electric short circuit. There's the bulb is showing, and some of the red plastic's missing. So I picked pieces out of the light housing that had kind of collapsed within the light and dropped them in John's driveway.
So here she's admitting, number one, it was broken. Number two, pieces were missing. She also talks about picking pieces out and dropping them in the driveway. One of the questions people have always had is why they didn't find all the pieces. They reconstructed the taillight, but there are some pieces missing. Well, I don't know. It sounds like Karen Reed might have just explained that for you.
Peppered with the taillight. but you know what's wonderful about this, why they chose to play this clip after Carrie Roberts, is what did Carrie Roberts say in her direct? She talked about the taillight being broken early in the morning. That's good for the prosecution, very bad for Karen Reed later, because if the conspiracy was that the police came in and broke her taillight to make it look like she hit something, then how could it possibly be broken before the police were ever involved, right? And so this is very sneaky because it doesn't directly have to do with Carrie Roberts, but they prepped Carrie, they knew what she was going to testify to, and this was going to bolster a very important part of her testimony. And so when, you have Alan Jackson say, you perjured yourself, what really mattered? This whole taillight timeline. And here we have Karen Reed saying, yep, Carrie's telling the truth. And it was a great way for this clip to punctuate, well, you should believe everything else Carrie said too then.
John O'Keefe's mother testified as well. And this was both to talk about him, humanize him, but also to talk about that day. And one of the things that she was asked is whether she ever said to Karen that it looked like John had been hit by a car. And that was setting up the next clip we're going to play. The defense objected to this clip And we'll talk about the law on this in a second. But the reason they object to this clip is because it makes Karen look so bad. But I'm going to play it for you, and then we'll talk about it. Essentially, the judge tabled it for the night, came back the next morning, allowed the Commonwealth to play it. So they didn't get to play it right after the mom, but frankly, I don't think it matters. So this is Karen, at least according to John's mom, lying about what John's mom said to her.
His mother leans over the kitchen island and says to me, I think it looks like he got hit by a car. It looks like he got hit by a car.
So if you couldn't hear it, she was mocking the dead man's mother.
And go watch it, because her face when she does it. She basically emulates the Wicked Witch of the West when she does it. It's so off-putting, right? Because it's so off-putting, the defense objected. And they had sort of like a couple objections. One, I mean, basically they said, look, it has no real probative value, because its real probative value would be to impeach John's mom. You know, she says she didn't say it. Here's evidence she did say it, that this isn't really evidence she did say it. And so that's not really relevant for the purposes or whatever. And so under a 403 analysis, you can keep it out. In 403, we've talked about this before. If probative value is substantially outweighed by an unfair factor, and there's several, one is unfair prejudice, then you don't let it in. And that's sort of the argument, like the probative value is low. The problem with this for Jackson, and you had some of the, you know, the internet lawyers who aren't real lawyers were all like, oh, no, this is reversible error and all this other stuff. And I just got to tell you, if somebody starts telling you something like that, ask for a cite, ask for some law. Say, hey, wait, do you got any law that says that? I'm just curious, you know, which court, this is a very well litigated area of the law. So surely you have some law that will support you there. So what are the reasons for this? Number one, because Karen lying about what happened that morning shows consciousness of guilt, right? She is attempting to sort of push this off on other people. This was a conspiracy that was born very early on. You know, his mom was saying this, and that's how it got into the minds of the police. It shows sort of consciousness of guilt. There's all sorts of reasons you'd want to show this, like that this is part of the cover up. All these are the reasons, right? These are the probative reasons you'd want to do it. And the reason to keep it out is because it makes Karen Reed look really bad. And as we've said before, if the only purpose of the evidence is to make someone look really bad, for instance, they're on trial for check fraud and they have a rape conviction from 25 years ago, that's not going to come in because it's not probative of the current case and it makes them look really bad. The problem with this is, like I said, there's a very well-developed area of the law on this. And make a long story short, it's really up to the judge. So I'll give you some law from Massachusetts. I promise I'll try not to bore you about this. I tweeted about this. So if you want to read the whole analysis, you can do it there. So the Massachusetts Supreme Judicial Court has said the defendant's extrajudicial statements are admissible unless subject to exclusion on other grounds. So that means we start from the presumption that a statement made by the defendant is coming in. It's not even hearsay. It's an exception to hearsay. So you have to show some reason it shouldn't. You can overcome that presumption. Like I said, we're on 403. So in order to show this, the question the judge has to answer is whether the evidence is relevant and whether its probative value is substantially outweighed by its prejudicial effect. And these are matters committed to the trial judge's broad discretion. And the court has said they will, quote, not be disturbed absent palpable error. And what does that mean? What is palpable error? So here's what the court has said about that. A party who claims an abuse of that discretion assumes a heavy burden. That burden is not met by merely arguing that on a debatable question of admissibility, the judge ruled against the defendant while another judge could and might have ruled in his favor. Rather, the party must show that no conscientious judge acting intelligently could honestly have taken the view expressed by him. So in order, let's say that Karen Reed is convicted, and this is going to be her basis of appeal. They played a 10-second clip, so prejudicial that my entire conviction should be overturned. In order to succeed there, the burden they would have to meet is that literally no jurist would have let this in. That's how high the bar is. They're not going to meet that bar. It's at best debatable. It was really up to Judge Cannon, and this is the way it is in trial. And we've said this before about why trial judges are so powerful. Yeah, you can appeal anything. But at the end of the day, you really have to show that someone acted just so egregiously to overturn a conviction on something like this. And the problem is, it doesn't even stop there, because even if you show that, then you have to deal with a harmless error analysis. You have to show that the error is sufficient enough to overcome the rest of the evidence. And look, this is bad for Karen Read. It's literally 10 seconds. It's her choosing to say this on national television. Against that, we're going to have 4, 5, 6 weeks of testimony. Who knows how many witnesses? The chances some court is going to say, yeah, number one, the judge got it so wrong, we're going to say she committed this kind of error, this palpable error. And it was so powerful that no jury could have decided this case because they were so overawed by the prejudice here. That's not going to happen. So this is another instance where a lot of times on social media and other places, you're going to see people who are going to make sort of audacious claims about the law and about what's fair and about what the law requires and about appeals and everything else. But at the end of the day, usually they have no idea what they're talking about. That's the law for you on that.
And you can see the trial judge has so much discretion at the trial level because this is but one of hundreds of decisions of this kind that the trial judge will make during trial. And if we were able to have reversible error on all of these hundreds of decision points, there would be absolutely no finality and no ability for a trial judge to run their court. And they're the ones who literally see the witnesses, see the attorney's arguments, and see the video firsthand, as opposed to an appellate record that's a written record. And a lot is lost in writing in terms of the weight of the evidence, how it's conveyed, all those sorts of things. So that's why the trial judge has discretion. And this judge had discretion to allow this video in.
Yeah, I mean, and look, I think that's one thing you can take from this case to every case you watch. The individual decisions of the judge, unless they are incredibly egregious, are not going to result in a reversal. You know, I think back to the staircase. You know, they're letting in the death of a woman 20 years before that was kind of similar, where the coroner at the time said it was a natural death, but the coroner this time, who has a vested interest, does another autopsy and says, oh, no, it wasn't. Like, that didn't result in a reversal. The appellate court said, hey, that's, judge decided to let it in. And you compare that to this is just nothing compared to that. It just makes Karen Read look bad, and that's not enough. All evidence against the defendant is prejudicial, okay? That's one thing to remember. It prejudices the defense. All evidence does. It has to be unfairly prejudicial. And before it came in, one of the lawyers on Twitter, who's actually very good, and did sort of analysis of this and said, I don't think it's going to come in. And honestly, I didn't think Judge Cannon was going to let it in, because Judge Cannon is pretty conservative and when it comes to letting stuff in from the prosecution. But I said the reason it should come in is because the unfairness, there's no unfairness here. It's her own words. It's not like something she said under duress or under the emotion of the time. She said it on a nationally televised interview. So the idea that it's unfair now for it to come in, to me, is a very weak argument. They finished that up. We don't have a whole lot to talk about, frankly, because they did a lot of half days. One day they went out to the scene. They spent a half day doing that. There's been some legal argument. But one thing they did do was talk about Karen's sort of state of mind at the time. There were a couple things that were interesting there. One of the people said that they had treated her and had dealt with her in the immediate aftermath, had talked about that Karen said one of the things that made her sad was the last conversation they had was an argument. For some reason, well, even though this is patently obvious from the text messages, the defense nevertheless spent a good amount of time crossing this person, which maybe this will be effective for the jury. You never know. Maybe it will be. But to me, when you act like every single witness is lying or is part of the conspiracy or can't be trusted, and you attack them all, it really blunts the edge of your weapon, because the jury doesn't know which time to take you seriously. You did that with everybody. Like, is this the person who's really the murderer? Especially when you're in a case where they're not permitted to actually make the third party argument. The jury has to infer it based on the cross. So really, they need the cross of like Jen McKay to be when they really let it all hang out. and they've been going after everybody. So they did that, even though it's patently obvious. They read the text messages going up to the night where they went out, sort of showing all the stress in their relationship, this day-long fight.
I thought it was incredibly effective to move this way up, right? Because again, what has been so effective, I think, of the storytelling by the Commonwealth this time is letting Karen tell the story. She's really been the face, actually she has a face throughout this because of the video clips. She's been the narrator for the Commonwealth in a way that she wasn't in the first trial. The text came in much, much later. And then they were all muddled with the Proctor stuff. And even though the texts were really bad, there was enough bad stuff coming out in terms of smoke and screen that you can see the jury kind of get lost in everything. Seems kind of bad. Which texts are we talking about now? Here we have the beginning. We have clip, 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 text, 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 text. I mean, it is truly amazing because you have the defendant whom the jury can see at the defense table telling them the Commonwealth story. I think it's incredibly effective.
And they're doing it so much earlier, once again. I mean, I mentioned on one of the live streams that if we did this again, you could just forget the first 6 episodes we did, because really they've started at episode 7 or so. They've started in the meat of the case and they're presenting it so early. And one thing they're doing, at some point, I assume Proctor's going to have to testify. And it's going to be bad, just like it was last time. The difference is when he testified last time, the jury was not convinced that Karen was guilty. I feel like one of the things the Commonwealth is trying to do is build their case where the jury is already predisposed to think she is guilty based on everything they've heard. And so then when they hear Proctor, they're like, that wasn't nice, but I mean, she did kill the guy, right? I think that helps. And also terrible, but doesn't overcome all the evidence I've heard. And just the fact that their mindset is different. And we all know this. It's much easier to convince someone of something if they start with an open mind. If you walk into the socialist convention and try and teach them about how awesome free market capitalism is, you're going to have a much more difficult time than if you show up at the libertarian convention, right? They're more predisposed to hear you. And I feel like it's the same thing. You get the jury in a mindset where they are moving towards convicting her, that testimony is going to be less effective. So building the case the way they are, I think, is much more effective than what they did last time.
And kind of going with these analogies of how you think about these cases, the reason we say it's important to set the table early, by setting the table, the analogy I'm trying to say is that you decide what the story is all of a sudden you've erected all of these pieces of evidence. The clips of her saying, maybe I clipped him. I don't know. He didn't look mortally wounded, to text after text after text. Think of these as like pillars within this what is now becoming a maze. Before, when the prosecution waited so long to erect these pillars of evidence, it was just wide open space. The defense could just careen all over the place with their conspiracy, and they're not hitting anything because it doesn't even matter. It's just like wild. It's like giving my toddler, free reign of the car, and they can just drive everywhere and nothing stops them because there's no evidentiary pillars around to say, that's not true. You have to hit this to be able to go with that conspiracy. Now that they've erected all these essentially barriers, evidentiary barriers, right? Now the defense has to be very strategic in how they drive through these barriers, or they have to show how they can knock down each of these texts, each of these pieces of evidence. That's how I'm thinking about it and why I think it's so much more effective this time. So when these barriers go up, barriers being evidence, go up sooner, it limits how crazy the conspiracy can be allowed to develop on the defense side. And those barriers also exist as guardrails for the jury to understand the story they're being told, as opposed to be given like this blank scattershot, Jackson Pollock of a conspiracy given to them by the defense.
The other thing the Commonwealth did is they went ahead and proved a very important element of their case. So recall, there are 3 charges with some lesser includeds or whatnot, but really the theories are second-degree murder. She intentionally floored the car in reverse at John, left him to die in the snow, right? So whether she intended to kill him or not is irrelevant. Really, even if she intended to hit him or not is probably irrelevant. Did she act in a way that showed such a reckless disregard for human life that she's guilty of second-degree murder? That's sort of the major charge, the big one, the one that's going to be the most difficult to prove. The other one, the other 2 really, are that she was so drunk that this is sort of a DUI homicide, reckless homicide type thing, and leaving the scene of the accident. And you may recall the last trial, there were a lot of lawyers who talked about this and said it was going to be really hard for the Commonwealth to prove that because they had to prove she was drunk when it happened. And how do you prove someone's drunk when it happened? You really have to prove it through inference, which is just, well, we see her with glasses of clear liquid. We see her pouring what appeared to be shots of clear liquid into the glass. That's probably alcohol. that means she's probably drunk. And then they tested her blood alcohol level the next day, and it was still above the legal limit. So therefore, she was probably really drunk. We can estimate how drunk she was at the time. And the things people said was, well, number one, we don't know that she actually drank those drinks. The clear liquid could be water, which we thought was absurd because you don't pour shots of water into water. Maybe after this happened, I heard this a lot. Maybe after this happened, she was so upset that when she went home, she started drinking. She sort of drank away her sorrows that John had been so mean to her. And so that's what she was doing. And how are you going to prove that that's not what happened? Well, this time the Commonwealth not only put on the same evidence they put on last time, but when the doctors testified about her blood alcohol level, they once again called their very best witness, Karen Reed. So I'm going to play you the clips they played for you about her drinking. And I'll just go ahead and tell you, we're going to be here a while because this one goes on for a while because the woman loves to talk about how much she drank that night. So here we go.
And not for that I completed either. I didn't drink maybe more than a few sips at the waterfall.
And in order you both find to drive?
Yep.
Clip 8, please.
Okay.
So I just want to note, she's already said 6 drinks, no more than 6, right, at the waterfall, which
That's
is
not nothing.
That's not nothing.
I'm not gonna take some wild bets because there's a lot going on here. I bet on a lot in this trial, but I kind of think she could take you on a drinking game, Brett.
I think she could. Let me see if I can continue this.
And not for that I completed either. I didn't drink maybe more than a few sips at the waterfall.
And in order you both find to drive?
Yep.
Clip 8, please.
Okay.
And is the level of intoxication pretty high here for everybody?
It's happy.
Yeah.
It's
You had a lot to drink, right?
I wouldn't say I have like a normal amount. Like a vodka tonic every 40 minutes.
Okay. And so are you feeling like buzzed? And I'm not judging, I'm just trying to get a sense.
Buzzed.
Yeah.
Clip 9, please.
The final count of my alcohol intakes, probably about 5 or 6 or 4. The drinks that they were pouring me at McCarthy's, which is where I consumed most of the alcohol, was the weakest vodka tonic. It tasted just like all soda water with lime. Not that I need it to be a martini, but it might have had a splash of vodka in it. So I said, John, this drink tastes like it has no vodka in it. He said, just get a shot and mix it yourself. So each drink was being counted as a double. So I would get a vodka tonic, and then I would pour a shot into it, so that becomes 2. Frankly, it just felt like a regular cocktail. It was just a really weak pour, so I asked for a shot. So for my taste, it just tasted like that's the normal strength of what a drink should be. So I had maybe 2 or 3 that are being counted as 4 and 6. And I don't know. I felt fine. I felt like I was buzzed. And then there was one drink, the last one that was given to me, which I would have counted as 3, but they're counting as my 6th cocktail. The guys that were with brought around shots, and they gave me one that I didn't drink, but I poured it in my drink. So that's now my 5th and 6th drinks with the 7th, which is a shot that all the men did, and I poured it. So that one glass that I'm holding, that I go into the waterfall with, has 3 drinks in it, a vodka tonic and 2 shots. And which is why John said to me, you're not leaving that drink here, like you haven't touched it and just poured a bunch of vitamins, like just take it with you, which was something he always did. So then I go into waterfall, and I put that drink down and I socialize most of the time. So that would have been my fifth, sixth, and seventh drinks. Then John orders me to drink the waterfall that I don't drink, that he takes with him. And then there was a round of shots that Chris Howard bought that I did take. So that would have been the night. But I did not consume 9 vodka martinis or take 9 shots, depending on how you count it. And the last 2 drinks, I didn't touch.
Clip 10, please.
And I'm not as clear as I would be if I hadn't been drinking. I mean, I had drank, so, and that led me to question, like, could I have hit him? Did I run over his foot or hit him in the knee? Did I incapacitate him? I mean, I always drive with my music blasting ever since I was 16. And I know when John got out of the car to go into Fairview, I know my car was blasting because when I got in it the next morning to go look for him, I had to immediately turn it down. And I don't know, it's stormy. I have had a few cocktails. I didn't black out, but I wasn't as lucid as I would have been if I had gone to bed at 9 and drank a tea. But so I was fuzzier than I would have been if I had no alcohol.
Clip 11, please.
How did you feel after that? I mean, when you got that part, did you feel like you could drive, and did you feel how I wouldn't have gotten on the expressway. I wouldn't have gotten on the expressway at 12:15 on January 29th. I mean, it was quiet. The roads were very quiet. You can see it on the videos. And I was going, when I've had a few drinks and I drive, I always drive extra slow. So I know my alerts aren't as sharp as they should be. But I shouldn't have been driving. But I don't think I was driving. I know I wasn't driving recklessly. I mean, I've got plenty of video of myself driving all over the place. I put my car in John's garage, which is incredibly narrow, and I have a very oversized SUV. You see me. There's a video of me driving through the intersection when we leave Warrenville to go to Brian Albert's, and I was always taught by my father, even when you have a green light, you always should tap the brake. You don't know who's going to run red. And I see me doing that multiple times between 12 and 1 and 5 and 6 a.m. So I know I was driving safely, not as safely or as alert as I would be if I had no alcohol. But I was not driving recklessly by any measure.
Thank you.
So, I mean, they weren't going for comedy, but the clip after clip after clip and the complete just monotone Exhibit 5, Exhibit 6 was just excellent. Because what happened? Remember when we watched all of that surveillance footage in the first trial with no sound, and we saw Karen Reed walking around with glasses with clear liquid in them, and she was pouring things into them, right? The defense was like, well, she had a lot of water, and she was pouring water from one cup to the next. She just said in that interview herself, those drinks were so weak. They tasted like nothing to me. It was a weak pour. So of course I added some additional shots to it. So basically what she's saying, she's adding to the count. We only saw about 6 glasses. And she's saying, no, those are weak pours. So I added shots to the glasses that you even saw on the surveillance camera. And she admits to being, quote, fuzzier. All of us who've done interviews with people. This is kind of like when you tell your doctor how many glasses of alcohol you drink in a week, they just like multiply it by 4. They're like, sure, you have 2 glasses of wine a week. More like 8. We'll put 8 in your chart. Kind of like that, right? If she herself is already saying she's fuzzier than she would have been otherwise, she was probably way fuzzier. And
she got to 9 on her own.
The best defense, right? She herself got to 9. The best defense was, I didn't drink all 9. And know what she said. The last 2, we took them with us. What do we find in the snow later? The bar glass, right? She is putting the bar glass there as opposed to we haven't even gotten there yet.
Come from the house.
It didn't come from the house. She's the one who's putting the bar glass from the waterfall at the accident scene that she says she took with her and John took with him.
I mean,
she is telling the story for the Commonwealth.
If you have any doubt that she was over the legal limit at that point, I don't know what to tell you. Number one, the drinks were weak, so I added a shot. classic somebody who drinks all the time. The drinks probably had 1.25 ounces alcohol in them, which is the legal standard for a single. And, when I pour my glasses of bourbon for our nights, I don't pour 1.25 ounces in there. I mean, it's always at least a double, right? And she would have been doing the same thing. Here's the thing. The way alcohol affects you, like if you have a high tolerance, it takes a lot for you to be visibly drunk. It does not necessarily, the processing is the same. Like at 0.08, if I'm at 0.08, you would not be able to tell at all, right? Like my level has to be much higher than that. But if I'm stopped by the police, I'm going to blow 0.08, right? So the fact of the matter is she's drinking all these drinks and she's taking shots. And I'll just go ahead and tell you, a bartender from CF McCarthy's is going to testify, we don't water down our vodka. So the shots she was taking, and remember, she took shots. There were shots she put in, but she talks about shots being going around and she's taking shots. She's drinking a lot. She's drinking a lot. And she didn't have 4 vodka tonics at CF McCarthy's if she didn't drink the first 3. Like she wants to say, oh, well, I didn't even really drink them all. You drank the first 3 and then you got the 4th one and you added apparently 2 shots to it or whatever. Or you took a shot and you poured one in there and you brought it with you. And then you got another drink from John. You're not going to convince me that there were just all these vodka tonics surrounding Karen. Because if they were, how'd she know they were weak? Why'd she keep ordering shots? She drank those drinks.
Why would you, first of all, just baseline. Why would you keep paying money for drinks you weren't drinking? Because drinks are not inexpensive. Certainly not 4 drinks. I'm not going to just look at my $10, that's like a cheap one. I don't think that it was only $10 vodka and be like, you know what I'd like to do? Spend another $40 on vodka. I'm not going to drink.
It's mind blowing. It's mind blowing. And once again, I just feel like all these things are lessons for all of us and how we consume true crime. The people who were telling you, well, how do we know she wasn't just drinking water? Forget those people. Those people are so obviously.
Use your common sense. Use your
common sense. It's so important. Basically, at this point, what do we have? I mean, just think about this. We're a few days into this trial. What do we have? We have Karen Reed admitting that she had, by her estimation, 9 drinks that night, that she drove John, that she could have hit him. Did she clip him? Did she hit him in the knee? Even though she's going to tell you she saw him. If she saw him walk in to that house, which is now her story, that is completely incompatible with her thinking maybe she hit him. It just doesn't make any sense. And you can see why she needs both these lies. And she needs you to not put them together. She needs you to compartmentalize your mind, right? She needs you to consider, on the one hand, she saw him walk into that house. So since she saw him walk into that house, she couldn't have done it. It must have been something that happened in that house. In the other compartment, she needs to explain to you why she called Carrie Roberts and said, John is dead. Why she said he's probably dead and got hit by a snowplow, which, by the way, if you want to think Carrie Roberts committed perjury, guess what? John's niece is going to testify that Karen said he's dead. He got hit by a snowplow right after she had that conversation with Carrie Roberts. She absolutely said that. She has to explain why she was running around. And at best, as John is laying in the snow saying, did I hit him? Could I have hit him? Maybe I hit him. Just not I hit him. Right? She has to explain that. Well, how do you line those up with her thinking, well, maybe I did that with watching him go into the house? That's impossible. And we've proven she was drunk that night. We are halfway there. And you have to believe that we've proven those things. Those things happened. But nevertheless, despite that, at the same time, everything's happening. And oh, by the way, her taillight was broken before she even left John's house that morning. All of that happened. But at the same time, the dog and the teenagers and the lifelong friends and the first responders and the police and the judges and the Supreme Court and everybody else in the world was all conspiring to kill John. And it just all happened to come together with her doing all this stuff right as John is being murdered by a dog and a teenager in that house. You have to believe all that. And we're only a week in.
For seemingly no reason. And for some reason, the thin blue line is going to basically conspire to kill this one other blue man. Are you kidding? Like, there is no motive. There's no understanding of why were they mad at John? Why this and why Karen? I mean, we're only 1 week in, but they basically, I think the Commonwealth has basically proven, if they prove that Karen hit John, and they're getting there with the whole taillight thing and her own words here, I think I clipped him. This should be sufficient for, I think, 2 of the charges. Murder 2, I think we still have to get there, right?
Yeah, and look, the Commonwealth, I think what we're going to see is this is just the beginning of their preparation. I mean, they are so prepared with these clips. They've also got a lot more vehicle data. I think the science is going to be better. They're going to have a reconstructionist testify. I think by the end of this, should be a slam dunk.
Yeah, and this is going to be the case because Brennan gave us kind of a 3-part series in his opening, and we are in part 1. And basically what it is leading up to everything, her own words, which has been very effective so far, a little bit about who John is. So we care about the victim because this is really about a man who is now dead, who should not be dead. And then ending with a lot of the science. So we know from kind of the roadmap he gave us in the opening what will be following, and the evidence he's going to end with, I think, is just going to be nails in the coffin of a hopefully conviction, a rightful conviction.
And on Monday, we have Arca has to come and be voidard, however you want to pronounce it. Voidard. I don't know how you pronounce it. Voidard. In Alabama. It'll be Voidard. So that's going to be fun because with all sorts of weirdness going on there.
I can't wait to watch that.
We had all these arguments about whether or not Karen drank. The other thing, this wholly independent group of people on their own with no connection to the defense who never had even spoken to them concluded that John must have been killed by something other than a car. Well, you're about to find out all that wasn't true, and we're going to see whether or not they can even testify at all. I mean, I don't know if you heard this, Alice, but apparently there were all these text messages between Arca and the defense team.
I heard. I'm going to
be been deleted. It was a long time ago, Alice. It was a long time ago. Why would you keep those?
2 years is a long time. I think I have text from you from like 10 years ago on this.
It's amazing. It's just incredible. It's incredible.
Well, I actually don't have my meetings tomorrow, so I'm going to be watching in real time with you guys.
Awesome.
If you want to come join us.
Yeah. And if you're a patron, we're live streaming the trial. We're often not there. We pop in every now and then, but it's a good place for you guys if y'all want to talk about the case as it's going. You have your own chat room. You can discuss it. So we'll keep running that for you. We're going to try and do this every week or so, recap this as the trial goes on. Look, we'll see what happens. I mean, I've said before, I hate to give Turtle Boy any credit because he deserves little. But if Karen Reed is not convicted, unless something happens in the trial that really surprises me, it will be because of the cult that he built for her. And one of the cult members is on the jury. That is why she will be acquitted. So let's see what happens.
I don't know, acquitted. I think mistrial because I
cannot
believe that there are 12 cult members on there. My faith in the jury system, I cannot believe there are 12 cult members on there, but I could see one have slipped through.
Yeah.
And they were dishonest in the jury selection process.
Right.
Wow.
All right. That's all I got.
Well, it was closer to the 85 minutes I joked about, but a lot happened. And come join us on the live stream. This is for patrons. There's a live stream link that you can go into. Some great conversation happening in the chats as well. And if you like this, don't like this, really hate our tone. Apparently the Karen Reed series got people up on arms of our tone. Let us know. We're happy to hear about it, but only leave the 5-star review if that's what you want. And if you do leave a 5-star review, you get a question. Do we have time for a question today, Brett?
Sure. I mean, why not? We've been going.
Why not? We've been talking about Karen Reed, so let's just throw in a question. So if you leave a 5-star review, you get to ask a question. I will tell you this. We have a long list of questions over at the Prosecutors Podcast, but here on Legal Briefs, it's kind of a little well-known secret to our fans, but leave a 5-star review here and your question is pretty much at the top of the line if you want it answered.
Okay, let's see. This is long. So you have a man and a woman are married, right? And there is some room where she thinks there's evidence of a crime. Husband goes out of town and she calls the police and gives them permission to search the house. They search the house and they find a whole bunch of evidence that this person, the husband, is guilty of a crime. Will that search stand up at trial? So I guess essentially your question is, okay, so this is all about reasonable expectation of privacy. And the Supreme Court has said, I think I'm getting this right, that if two people are living in a house, both people have the right to give the police permission to search the house. So you would have to show that that room there was some reason
Let's say,
that like
let's
that
say it was a
person-
shed that he owned before she moved in, and he had
There
a
you go.
cipher lock on it that only he had the code to. And she's never been in there. He's never given her the cipher lock. And he said something like, oh, that's like mementos. I'd rather you not go in there. I'm actually holding things for my uncle. It's not even my stuff. So she would have no reasonable expectation with that. But if it's just their literal closet that they have together, and she didn't know there was a loose footboard or something, and that you could take it out. But she's using that closet every day. It's her house. And this is why you've seen in the movies, like an unwitting girlfriend opens the door and like there's a split screen and the guy is like running to his girlfriend's house being like, don't let the police in. And the police kind of knock and say, ma'am, do you mind if we just take a look around for a second? She's like, of course, I have nothing to hide. Come on in. And the boyfriend gets there like a second later and the police are like, we're already in. She already gave us, we found your drugs. That's why that scene can exist, because they both lived there. It's her house to allow the search to happen. And he didn't get there in time to say no. So it was all fair game.
Exactly. So
No
be careful
cipher
who you
lock,
marry.
nothing. No.
Careful who you marry.
Get a cipher
It
lock.
gets confusing. I'll tell you how, when it gets confusing is if you have roommates, if you live in a
Hotel rooms.
We've had hotel rooms. We've had
or
one
extended
with
stay. Fraternity houses. That's right.
Yeah.
I always thought
So,
the
like,
hotel
where you
room
have-
was interesting because you can check out, and whether you've checked out long enough, but you intentionally left things there. We have that a lot where someone checks out, but they leave their stuff behind, and they're like, but it's my stuff, but you checked out, like no longer is that your room once you check out.
Yeah. What is abandonment? I've seen this with rental cars. So you don't turn in your rental car on time. Does it, at that point, do you still have an expectation of privacy in it? Like that kind of stuff. There's all these sort of like little factual questions you have to, but they're all about, do you have a reasonable expectation of privacy that society is willing to honor? Because remember, this is all made up, right? So basically, all of this stuff, the exclusionary rule, we talked about this before, it's all a prophylactic to protect your core rights not to have your papers, persons, or things searched without probable cause, right? That it protects those core rights in the Bill of Rights. Those are the rights. Those are the actual rights. But the way that we protect those rights is this made up, this judicially created doctrine about exclusion and when you can exclude things and when you have this reasonable expectation of privacy and all stuff. And because it's all made up, it's very much fluid and it's fact dependent. And you're always arguing like all these different things and it gets wild. And so in certain circumstances, for instance, at a trial, these rights apply to you. If, however, it's like a probation violation, they don't. All of a sudden, if the police violate your rights to prove you violated your probation, sorry, exclusionary rule doesn't apply there. Why not? Because we just decided we didn't want it to go that far, right? So that's what you see happen in these cases.
Good question. Also, good plots to movies and episodes of
Lots of law and order turn on these questions.
There you go. There you go. Well, thank you guys for sticking with us through this Karen Reed update. Let us know if there are other topics you want us to cover. Way to go on kind of these legal questions as well, because you get a little, certificate or a little star on your prosecutor's university degree there. You can email us at prosecutorspod@gmail.com. You can find us on social media. We are all over the place. Brett, is there anything else you'd like to add as we go into Karen Reed season 2?
Episode
Season 2, episode 2.
No, man, it's going to be a long ride. And you can tell Brennan is more thorough than Lally was. And the defense is asking just as many questions as they did last time. So I don't know that Brennan will call as many witnesses. I feel like he's cutting some of the fat, but it's going to be a while. So enjoy the ride.
Indeed. Well, guys, until next time, I'm Alice.
And I'm Brett.
And this is the Prosecutor's Legal Briefs. I might have soccer on Friday, but Thursday, I mean.
In my mind,
I have nothing on my calendar on Tuesday.
a reason I can't do Tuesday.
Okay, that's fine.
But I could be wrong. Maybe it's Wednesday I can't do.
All right. Well, you figure that
Either
out,
way.
and then we'll do that episode before we do Friday.
Okay. Sounds
Don't forget,
good.
we have to end the live so that we can download.
Yeah, we do. All right. Bye, guys. Love
We'll see you tomorrow.
Mean
Don't
it.
worry. We'll see you like
later.
at 9
See you
a.m.
tomorrow. Yeah. Bye.
Bye, y'all.